As the clock struck midnight, I sat alone in my dimly lit living room, the only company being the eerie glow of the streetlights casting long shadows through the curtains. The sound of rain tapping against the window pane added to the ominous atmosphere, but I brushed off the unease, gnawing at the back of my mind. After all, I was accustomed to spending my nights alone in my cozy little apartment. Just as I settled in with a book, there came a sudden sharp knock at the door. Startled, I glanced at the clock. Who could possibly be visiting at this hour? My heart raced as I cautiously made my way to the door. Peering through the peephole, I saw a figure standing outside, cloaked in darkness, their face obscured by the hood of their rain-soaked coat. With a sense of trepidation, I reluctantly opened the door, the creaking hinges echoing through the silent apartment. The stranger stood before me, their hood still drawn, rain dripping from the edges. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. The figure remained silent for a moment before speaking, their voice a low, raspy whisper that sent chills down my spine. "I apologize for the late hour, but my car broke down a few blocks away. I was wondering if I could use your phone to call for assistance." My instincts screamed at me to refuse, to slam the door shut and lock it tight, but something about the stranger's demeanor made me hesitate. Perhaps it was the desperation in their voice, or the way they seemed to shrink back from the rain. "Of course," I replied, stepping aside to allow them entry. "Come in. I'll get you a towel and the phone." As they stepped into the warmth of the apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me, like a suffocating blanket. Their presence seemed to cast a shadow over the room, a darkness that clung to the air like a tangible force. Handing them a towel, I watched as they dried themselves off, their movements slow and deliberate. There was something off about them, something that set my nerves on edge, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. As they reached for the phone, I couldn't help but notice the way their hands trembled, the way their fingers lingered on the keypad for a moment too long. It was as if they were stalling, buying time for something sinister lurking just beneath the surface. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I realized too late that I had made a grave mistake. I should have trusted my instincts, should have listened to that voice screaming at me to turn them away. Suddenly, the stranger's demeanor shifted, their eyes darkening as a cruel smile played across their lips. "Thank you for your hospitality," they said, their voice dripping with malice. "But I'm afraid I won't be needing that phone after all." Before I could react, they lunged forward, grabbing me by the throat with a strength that belied their seemingly frail frame. Panic surged through me as I struggled against their iron grip, but it was no use. I was trapped at the mercy of this unhinged stranger. As darkness closed in around me, I couldn't help but wonder what had led me to this moment. Was it mere chance, or had fate intervened, leading me down this twisted path to my inevitable demise? The last thing I saw before everything went black was the stranger's face, twisted into a mask of madness as they whispered words that chilled me to the bone. "Welcome to your worst nightmare," they hissed, their voice echoing in the darkness as everything faded away into nothingness. And in that moment, I knew that inviting a stranger in the dead of night had been the gravest mistake of my life.
The dark, awakening darkness enveloped me like a suffocating cloak as consciousness slowly returned. My head throbbed with a dull ache, and every muscle in my body felt as though it had been pounded into submission. Disorientation clouded my senses as I struggled to make sense of my surroundings. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I realized with a jolt that I was no longer in my cozy apartment. Instead, I found myself in a dimly lit room, the walls adorned with ancient tapestries and eerie symbols that sent shivers down my spine. Where was I, and how had I ended up here? Memories flooded back in fragments. The stranger at my door, the sudden attack, the darkness swallowing me whole. But what had happened next remained a blur, obscured by the fog of confusion that clouded my mind. With a sense of dread creeping over me, I attempted to rise from the cold, hard floor, only to be met with searing pain that shot through every fiber of my being. Something was terribly wrong. I could feel it in my bones. As I struggled to stand, a figure emerged from the shadows, their features shrouded in darkness. It was the stranger from before, their presence looming over me like a sinister specter. "Welcome back to the land of the living," they sneered, their voice dripping with malice. Or should I say, the land of the undead? My blood ran cold at the realization of what had transpired. I had been transformed into something otherworldly, something inhuman. Panic surged through me as I scrambled to make sense of this newfound reality. How could this be happening? And what did this mysterious stranger want from me? But before I could utter a word, they advanced towards me, their movements slow and deliberate. Fear gripped me like a vice as I braced myself for the inevitable. With a flash of fangs and a guttural growl, they sank their teeth into my flesh, sending waves of agony coursing through my veins. It was a pain unlike anything I had ever experienced, a torment that threatened to consume me whole. As darkness closed in around me once more, I realized with a sinking heart that my life would never be the same again. I was no longer human. I was something else entirely, a creature of the night bound to serve the whims of my vampire master. As I surrendered to the darkness, I couldn't help but wonder what twisted fate awaited me in this new and unforgiving world.